Okay, good morning. Hi, everybody. This is Val Newcomb. I head up marketing and communications for Lumen, and I want to thank you for joining us today. My colleagues and I are all joining from Charlottesville, Virginia, although we're all remote and safe and healthy at home, and I really hope all of you are as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time during this weird time to join us for a Lumen webinar and hear what's new. Today, we're going to be talking about designing an energy storage system without a protected loads panel. And with that, I will introduce Kevin O'Shea. He's the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Lumen, and he'll get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Val. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, thanks to everybody for joining, and echo Val's sentiment in these COVID times. Get to talk to installers pretty regularly around the country, and I continue to be encouraged and buoyed by the resoluteness of everyone and the fact that everyone's remaining busy and productive. Most installers that I've spoken to, particularly in the last week or so, are optimistic that things will continue to turn around, and that energy storage, which is a big part of what we're here to talk about today, that energy storage will be more and more relevant to their business and to the market and to the world at large. So, some of the concepts and things we're talking about today, I think even become more relevant in a post-COVID world. So thanks again. And yeah, without further ado, we can dive in. Again, like Val mentioned, this is Kevin O'Shea. I'm co-founder, chief commercial officer. I joined Alex at the inception of the company, and it's been a super fun ride so far. And we're thankful again for you folks. I've got a little bit of ground to cover. I'm going to try and get through it quickly so that we can pass the ball to John Profit. John is with us on the line here. John heads up our application engineering team, a highly valuable resource here at Lumen. I know you guys will be excited to hear from John about some of the technical details and single line diagrams about when Lumen is able to replace a protected loads panel and when it might not be able to. So I will cover a few areas, talk to you a little bit more about Lumen and who we are. I'll speak about the hardware and how and where Lumen's installed, and then touch on the software and some of the responsiveness. And so that's what I'll cover, and I should be able to get through my piece in probably 7 or 8 minutes. So thanks. Yeah, so we are Lumen, headquartered here in Charlottesville, Virginia. We're about 20 people. We have a super singular obsession and purpose, really, and that's to take an ordinary electrical panel and make that electrical panel responsive and smart. And that's what we do. As I think about the opportunity, and I try and communicate it to my kids and stuff, every electron that flows into a building or that flows into a home flows through the circuit breaker panel. And there's hundreds of millions of them out there. And so let's build a technology that captures that information and helps to bring the circuit breaker panel into the 21st century. And yeah, that's what we're doing, and so far so good. So that's Lumen. I've got a few slides on the hardware and how and where it's installed. So you see our box over on the right-hand side. It's being manufactured here in Lynchburg, Virginia. We've got a great manufacturing partner that's still active during these COVID times. So that's great. We've got nearly 100 Lumen certified installers that are installing the product, every day, every week, really all around the country. Our efforts are focused in the USA right now, but in time, that will continue to grow. The product is patented. Got several patents on the Lumen smart panel that you see. It's UL compliant to standard 61010 and 916. And what it does is help make ordinary circuits smart and responsive. So it'll pair with any circuit breaker panel. It doesn't matter if it's ABB, Schneider, and it will capture very detailed utility grade revenue data at the circuit level. And Lumin can switch and control up to 60 amp loads. And it also comes with the ability to detect grid outages. So we ship with a grid voltage detection module, which is one of the keys for us. You know, one of the main missions we have at Lumin, certainly today, is to help protect the battery, to help protect an energy storage system. So we can sense a grid outage and then automatically go to work for homeowners. Transitioning to where you might see the Lumin panel installed and you know what it looks like when it's fully installed. You can install the Lumin panel really wherever you can find space. It could be, most cases it's below the existing electrical panel, it could be above it, could be alongside it, could even be behind it. We don't have pictures there, but in places like Puerto Rico and markets like Puerto Rico, many cases installers will enter from, you know, a closet behind the electrical panel. So wherever you can find space and wherever it might look the coolest, you can connect Lumin to that electrical panel wherever you can find room. And then finally on the hardware is how it's connected. You know, the easiest way for me to think about Lumin is that it sits in between the existing electrical panel and your loads. It installs in, call it, 4 hours. Like I mentioned, we can switch and control up to a 60 amp load. And basically we're intercepting the load wire from an installation standpoint. You remove the load wire, insert the Lumin wire into the box, current flows through our Lumin box. That's where we have our electromechanical relays. And the second Lumin wire comes out and gets wire nutted to the load wire. Lumin can govern up to 12 lines. So that could be 6 dual pole circuits, 12 single pole circuits, or any combination. Typically, most installers work with a homeowner and they will connect Lumin up to the dedicated circuits. So the heavier loads, range, dishwasher, dryer, AC units, EV chargers, things like that. And then, you know, from there, the software takes over. So we've got some awesome software. We've got proper apps for Android, or you can go to the Apple Store and download the Lumin app, search Lumin Smart in the App Store, and it'll pop right up there for you. And you know, so you can access your electrical panel through the app or through a web interface like I usually show from. And it really helps enlighten homeowners about their energy consumption and what's going on, helps them understand if they have inefficient appliances or if they're failing, and you know, Lumin can help enlighten that and help you understand when that might be the case. And then we also allow for control, and we want, to the degree that we can, automate that control. You know, many times if there's an outage and you do have a residential energy storage system, you don't know when the power goes out. So we want Lumin to be able to respond to that automatically so that we can protect the battery for you. And in time, we'll continue to grow our modes to be able to address utility tariffs that might have dynamic pricing as well. So a little bit more on protecting the battery, because really that's our main mission today, is to help, you know, increase the value of an energy storage system. So with Lumin, with our off-grid mode, again, we detect when grid voltage is out, and then we will automatically begin to shed the heavier loads, again, based on customer preferences. The cool thing is this is reconfigurable, so it responds straight away. If in time your lifestyle changes or you add maybe more energy storage to your system, you can reconfigure the off-grid mode accordingly. And really it just helps with protecting the battery and not having it be prematurely depleted. So when you come home from work, you discover there's an outage and your battery's drained because you have all your appliances going, or you haven't changed anything. So that's what Lumin helps with, and also can help with the max power output limitations that some energy storage systems have. And then, you know, finally, a little bit more detail detail on how we respond to that outage. So we will shed your unprotected circuits on the order of 150 milliseconds, so we can respond quickly and drop those circuits that might otherwise deplete the battery or trip the inverter. And again, like I mentioned, this is all overrideable, and you can still interact if you come home and see that, well, Lumin has governed my water heater and shed the water heater circuit. You can still override that from your app. Just turn the circuit back on. So I'm winding down, and we're getting ready to turn it over to John for his piece on the protected loads panel. 2 more slides. And the other cool thing with Lumin is you can create schedules based on your preferences. So we have modes that automatically govern and trigger based on external inputs, but you can also create schedules that might correspond to your interests or your lifestyle. So if I wanted to, for instance, reduce some of my vampire loads or standby consumption, I can set schedules for those circuits, for those high vampire load circuits that say, hey, Lumin, when I'm asleep or when I leave for work, or let's just go ahead and turn off power to these circuits, save some money, save the planet. There's a safety factor as well. You can also create schedules, obviously, that might correspond with your time of use tariff. Or if you have, if you're in a market with dynamic electricity pricing, you can create schedules to compensate for that. So that's that. And then finally, and I will shut up and turn it over to John, is there's lots of cool stuff on our whiteboard. So once you have the Lumin panel in place, it's very easy for our team to upgrade the software remotely. We've got lots of modes planned, modes like demand charge reduction, where you can tell Lumin to, hey Lumin, clip my demand at X kilowatts, and here's the priority of my circuits. Pretty straightforward application for us. Also dealing with what's called fault detection, or helping you understand when you have appliances that are outside the norm and maybe chewing up too much power. We can signal some of those things for you to tell you what's going on there. And yeah, in time, being able to respond to grid operator or utility needs. That was one of the original pieces of the vision here, and it continues to be put wind in our sails. And that is, when the utility wants to reduce its peak, the homeowners can respond to that and share in the savings in time. So lots going on here. Thank you for listening. I will turn it over to the capable hands of Mr. John Profit.
My name is John, and like Kevin mentioned, I run our applications engineering department. My background includes about 7 years in residential and commercial solar. Prior to joining Lumin, I ran business development and commercial efforts for a mid-sized solar company out of Virginia. It was there that I was introduced to Lumin and was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to join this really cool and fun team. My responsibilities now include managing the certified installer program for Lumin, so onboarding new partners, as well as serving as one of the primary technical points of contact for our partners, and being that liaison between the field and then, of course, our engineers in the lab. So that's me, and for the next several minutes, I'll be going over some of the more technical details about when and how Lumin can help in replacing the protected loads panel, or we refer to that as a PLP sometimes. And then I'll start going over when it's a good idea to introduce Lumin and transition into what equipment is needed and how those designs or schematics look. I'll finish by outlining some of the common barriers we see and when Lumin is maybe not the best fit for replacing that protected loads panel. So when is it a good idea to introduce Lumin in replacement of the protected loads panel? So first and foremost, customer preference must be taken into account. So having heard from countless installers and being on the other end of a coffee table myself many times, talking about the difficulties of discussing which circuits to back up and which ones to leave behind, we know that whole house or customizable backup is really a big deal to homeowners. Today's modern consumer investing in a solar plus storage system is understandably often looking for more than a fixed set of protected loads. And they don't necessarily want the power outage or the service shutdown if you're in California to dictate their lifestyle. At the same time, homeowners are often looking for that extra level of visibility and protection, which replacing a protected loads panel with a responsive load management tool can certainly provide. Replacing the PLP is obviously beneficial to the installer as well. So there is, of course, the avoided labor of installing an additional subpanel for those protected circuits. That's especially true when the home's electrical system is more complex. Perhaps the owner is looking to back up circuits from multiple subpanels, like a garage fridge or lights for the in-law suite, for example. So having to rewire these sometimes distant circuits to a centralized protected loads panel may be difficult and expensive. On the same note, there's increased predictability when a PLP can be avoided. So, and of course, streamlining that sales cycle. So when one doesn't have to have that challenging conversation about determining essential circuits, the sales process can certainly be expedited. It can certainly be easier. And these are just some of the reasons to consider eliminating that PLP and adding responsive load management to the system design. So next I'll go over what equipment is required. So once it's been established that whole house backup or eliminating that protected loads panel is the way to go, there are really two key pieces of equipment that must now make it into the system design. The first being service rated ATS, automatic transfer switch, or microgrid interconnection device. So in order to isolate from the grid during an outage, a service rated ATS or MID must be included. Automatic transfer switch may be used to isolate the home from the grid and backup operation, and it may also be used as a point of interconnection for your standby power source, such as that generator or that battery system. A microgrid interconnect device is a newer term. It's specifically designed or defined, I should say, by the 2020 NEC as a device that allows a microgrid to separate from and reconnect to operate in parallel with a primary power source. Examples of these MIDs might include the Tesla Gateway or the soon-to-be released In-Phase Ensemble, their in-power switch. So it's a newer term, but in many ways serves a very similar purpose as a traditional ATS. Next, energy management platforms such as Lumin should be included. So those 12 lines of control that Kevin was going over, they can be connected to the home's largest loads. The 200 amp CTs that we ship with can be used to measure whole house consumption. And then that grid voltage detection line must be installed to monitor the status of grid power. And it's really our belief that this is a critical part of the design so that we're not exceeding the limitations of that energy storage system or standby power system when hooked up to a whole house. And really, it just provides for a better user experience for that homeowner during their outage. The next section of this webinar will go over what these systems look like schematically or electrically, where these key pieces of equipment belong, how they're interconnected. I think I have 3 really basic single line diagrams that will help demonstrate some of the common examples of system designs that we're seeing out in the field, but there are a lot of different technologies out there and electrical configurations. So this is certainly not all encompassing, and we certainly welcome anybody out there that's got a specific project that they're working on that they just want to, throw some ideas back and forth. We always love talking to folks and seeing if we can make these systems work. So feel free to let us know both during the Q&A as well as offline after this webinar if there are projects you want to explore. So the first example is a relatively small AC coupled solar and storage system. The first thing that you'll notice is that automatic transfer switch or microgrid interconnect device is located between the meter and the main distribution panel. You can see that right here. Traditionally, we would have seen that ATS or really an inverter with a built-in transfer capability positioned further downstream between the main distribution panel and a protected loads panel. Next, you can see in the diagram that both the PV system and the energy storage system are connected through separate load side connections to the main distribution panel. So one here, and then the other being here. This is only possible because the system is small enough and the main service is large enough to comply with NEC 120% rules for those load side connections. And then lastly, as you'll see in all of our diagrams, Lumin is connected to the largest circuits in the main for automated load management to protect that battery system. So that's diagram number 1. The next one that we'll go through is another example of an AC coupled system, but with a larger PV and energy storage system. So again, the ATS, or that MID, is located between the meter and the main distribution panel. The primary difference between the design, or this particular design, and the previous one is that due to the larger output of the PV and the battery, they're now being combined in this combiner panel or generation panel before interconnecting on that load side of the automatic transfer switch. So we can see our generation panel here, and then we can see that single output coming in to either a terminal or an adequate position inside of this ATS or MID to make for that connection. I'd say that this is likely one of the most common configurations we see in the field today, especially with Tesla Powerwall installers looking to do dual Powerwall systems or even single Powerwall systems, combining those PV and battery outputs and then connecting at a gateway. Even with larger energy storage systems, Lumin serves a really important role, we think, maybe less so in preventing the tripping of the battery, but definitely in managing the homeowner's energy consumption so that we can protect that battery and extend its useful runtime during outages. So the last thing a homeowner would want is to experience an outage at night, not know about it, and then maybe wake up with a full EV charge, but no battery life to keep the lights on or make that first cup of coffee in the morning. So even as these systems get larger, Lumin serves a very important role in managing that energy capacity. So that is the second AC coupled system that we'll go through. The last system design we have is a common DC coupled configuration. So similar configurations would also be seen in AC coupled systems that are using hybrid inverters with both AC in and AC out lines. Examples of these might include Outback Radians or Schneider XW or Darfon inverters. So like the previous two diagrams, we see the ATS or the MID located between the meter and the main. The AC in or grid tied inverter output line is connected by a supply side connection via the line side of the ATS. You can see that done right here. This is important for the PV system to be able to both supply load or export in regular grid operation. However, it must be isolated in the event of an outage. So the ATS will effectively do that. Next, the AC out or backed up inverter output can then be connected to either the load side of the main distribution panel through a backfed circuit breaker or the alternate power terminals in the ATS. So you can see if doing a load side connection, that's located right here, or option 2 follows this up to traditionally the generator terminals in that automatic transfer switch. So those are a couple of different ways that those types of systems, those types of inverters can be connected. So when the grid goes down here, the transfer switch will redirect the loads from the grid tied connection to the PV battery connection only. So Lumin, I'd say, is especially important to these installations as that single inverter output often has a more limited continuous power output or amperage limitation than some of those larger AC coupled systems. So it's extra critical that we're governing those largest loads, protecting that battery system and the inverter during that outage. So those are the 3 system configurations that I wanted to make note of. Equally important, we're going to go into a bit of detail about common barriers and maybe when we're not the best fit. So first, one of the most common barriers is really a geographically specific one, and it pertains to getting that ATS or that MID installed between the meter and the main. So we know with California and their all-in-one meter and load center combos, this can be particularly difficult. Most oftentimes we see installers having to add an additional load center and either relocating all of those circuits to this new service from that existing all-in-one, and then using Lumin to manage the heavy loads, or even just leaving those heavy loads upstream in the existing load center. Second, we see, as Kevin mentioned earlier, Lumin has a 60 amp circuit amperage limitation. So in some homes, we'll see circuits that are too large to connect to the lumen panel. Some common examples of these might include larger electric vehicle branch circuits, where multiple charging outlets are being fed by a single circuit. So another example would be subpanels. So 100 amp subpanel feeder circuits are also common. And if there are no large loads on that subpanel, if it's all lights and outlets and relatively small ones, it's probably not problematic. However, if there are larger loads, AC units, refrigerators, stoves, things like that, a second Lumen Smart Panel may be used at the subpanel level to control those loads. So that's the second common barrier that we come across. And then the third, lastly, in certain homes, we find it particularly difficult to install the Lumen grid voltage detection hardware. So because Lumen is generally positioned in the main distribution panel, installations that include detached service entrances, such as seen in detached garages, carports, or outbuildings in general, it may be challenging to run our single grid voltage detection line to a supply line upstream of that ATS or the MID that you saw in those diagrams earlier. So in each of these cases, using Lumen or load management to eliminate the protected loads panel may be difficult or even cost prohibitive for the customer. So those are the three barriers that we come across most often when we're looking into eliminating the PLP and using responsive load management. Now, one item we intentionally left off of that list is continuous Wi-Fi connectivity. So a recent update from our software team will really mitigate against this problem by allowing Lumen, our smart panel, to both operate offline as well as giving homeowners local control when a cloud connection is lost. So first, Lumen, it stores all of those schedules and the modes that Kevin spoke about. All of that functionality is stored locally so that if the grid and the internet both go down, the Lumen will still shed those large loads in the event of an outage. You can still run your schedules, you can still run your off-grid mode. Second, if the router is backed up, Lumen will have the capability to connect to that local area network that the router broadcasts, and homeowners can then continue to interact with their circuits as long as they're physically present and in the home. So the software guys have worked really hard to make this a robust tool that really helps in a lot of different cases. When you're off grid, we know that sometimes internet connection is not always guaranteed, and even in certain off-grid projects, Lumen can really step up and help manage those loads. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Val, and I believe we can open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, thanks, JP. That was great, and thank you, Kevin. I'm head up marketing, so I'll make a plug as we wait for any questions to come in. For following us on our YouTube channel, we have a lot of videos, and recently added a few homeowner-facing videos and installation videos, so please check those out. And also LinkedIn, and share the videos if you can with your team. And we'll be posting this webinar on our website and on YouTube, so check back in a day or so for that. I got one question, JP. I don't know if you guys are seeing others in the Q&A window that were sent directly to you, but one about our certified installer program and what's involved, if you could walk through that.
Sure. So the Lumen Certified Installer Program is relatively informal, and it's a three-step process that starts with a basic product demonstration conducted by one of our Lumen team members here. So we'll go over what the product is, how it operates, some of the things that Kevin went over. We'll do a deeper dive into the software and show what our insights portal looks like, the data that's available, as well as how the off-grid mode works. And then from there, if we find some projects that are a good fit, which we likely will, we will initiate an installation training. These days it's done virtually. Oftentimes we like to get out in the field, but we know that's impossible these days. And then really the third and final step is partner portal access. So kind of around the same time that we're doing installation training, we want to make sure that you have all of the access to our resources, our data sheets, spec sheets, install guides, circuit selection guides, single line diagram archives, things like that. And then we have a couple of optional steps that include both sales training as well as marketing and sales support.
Great, thank you. And thanks for all the questions that are rolling in. John, if you could answer, and I know the answer to this, but I'll let you take it away. Can you stack Lumen Smart panels and have 2 installed in one location? That's from Zach.
Cool.
We have a related question to that too. So there'll be a follow-up on the stacked question.
Yeah, absolutely. So most oftentimes we see that managing or connecting to up to 12 lines is enough for, your average energy storage system. However, if the homeowner or the installer thinks that it's better to control more, you can stack as many of these as you need, and then we just merge them together in the software so that they act as one system. So to answer your question, yes, they are stackable. You could do 2, you could do 3. I think the record that we've seen in a single service panel is 4, which allowed for 48 lines of control. That's, yeah, I think I answered that.
Jonathan follows up with a question. If there are 20 breaker slots that are filled, could 2 lumens be installed that handle 10 each? And the answer to that is yes. So I think you covered that question too.
We actually have an extra 4 to spare.
Yep. And then a question from Randy. How many different programmable modes are available?
Kevin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to contribute and earn my keep. So the mode that ships with Lumen today that's live is the off-grid mode, which is where we're primarily focused these days, is in protecting the battery. But we do make the API available, Randy. We work with some home automation companies that have developed drivers for Lumen, Control 4 specifically with the Sonnen application. So there's precedent there, and there is the ability to use our API to create your own programs. And we can talk more about that in detail as it's appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Another one from Randy. How does the Lumen panel respond to under/over voltage conditions as well as transients and surges?
Sure. So that really all goes into the Lumen grid voltage detection hardware. If voltage goes to nearly 0, that's really when we trigger the off-grid event and automate the load shedding. So if we see some somewhat subtle or even modestly significant surges or drops in voltage, Lumen will treat those kind of like a brownout, and we don't want to drop all of the loads in a house. It's really that distinct power outage that we seek to recognize, and only then do we automate load shedding.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And next question, I don't know, JP, if you want to answer this one too. Can you discuss how you deal with controlling loads on 3 different subpanels?
Sure. So the biggest hurdle here in subpanels is getting our grid voltage detection hardware installed in that centralized location upstream of where we're isolating from the grid. So the ATS, or that microgrid interconnection device. Now, once they're installed, you can program each of these to, control or shed or disable any of the respective loads in each subpanel. You don't have to shed all of them. You can only set, if you wanted, 2 or 3 in each to be shed, and they can be, distinctly done at each panel level. So you can really operate it as a single system, or you can operate them more independently, at the panel or even at the circuit level. Just depends on how you want to configure it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Stuart asks, notes that Bermuda follows NEC and has a grid more reliable than the US standard, as far as other questions from Paul. And someone else asked a question about access in Bermuda, if we had a training program in Bermuda.
Yeah, noted. Yeah, noted, Stuart. So thanks for that. Yeah, and we'd love to talk to you guys. And JP's been looking for a trip to Bermuda, so maybe we can make that happen. I see a question too. I'll jump on it, Val, if it's okay. Phil asks, can you explain the difference between Lumen and Sense? And there was a related question. So I think about everybody's heard of Sense. They're a marketing machine and a great company. And what they do is strictly home energy monitoring. It's a simple product, relatively inexpensive product that connects to your electrical panel and allows you to, do their best to disaggregate loads and allow you to see your energy consumption. But for sure, and if we've done our jobs well, everyone understands that there's a vast difference between Lumin and Sense, and what Lumin does that's unique and why people are implementing it is the control, and it's the automated control and the responsive control, and the ability to limit demand and curtail demand based on external signals, be it a grid outage, be it a power provider's signal. So it is that ability to control load responsively, Sense, and there's dozens of home energy monitors. They're all cool, but they don't allow you to take action, and that's the big differentiator with Lumin. And the other related question Phil had was, do you monitor the system and have access to the home data? And if so, what happens with the data on your end? So yeah, I don't know that we've talked about the data too much, so thanks for the question. Like we mentioned, Lumin can measure and control 12 circuits or 12 lines with revenue grade accuracy. So, and we provide 1 second interval data, and that data is, it's like the temple here, in that we do not contemplate doing anything with that data or selling that data to anyone. We do follow I forget who the guidelines are as far as anonymizing the data. We do make the data available anonymously to our installation partners. So you folks as the installers would have anonymized data from your installs, so that you can use that potentially for troubleshooting or energy services offerings, and you would have the ability to look at that information in like a fleet or an aggregate view. So hopefully that answers your question, Phil.
Great, thanks, Kevin. JP, you got a question here, I think, from John. Can Lumin manage circuits according to excess solar energy? Example, turn on off circuits to be used if solar is producing more than critical loads are consuming.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, in full transparency, to answer your question today, the answer is not quite. But in time, it's something that we are working on. So this tool, like Kevin mentioned, once installed is going to become more and more useful, more and more dynamic. We are building in more sophisticated tools that allow for really extra monitoring of what's happening within the home, both internally and externally, if there's, solar systems and such. So I think that's a feature that we're working on. One of the more difficult things with solar, particularly, is its volatility. So it's hard for us to turn a circuit back on if we don't know for sure that the solar PV system is going to maintain the adequate capacity or power to continue to operate that particular load. So right now we are limited to the inverter's output based off of a battery system that it's connected to, which is more stable and consistent. But in time, we're hoping to work on more tools to build in some of those extra variables, such as solar PV systems. So great question.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you for the follow-up there, JP and Kevin. And if there are any other questions, roll them in. We have a few more minutes here. We were hoping to stop at 11:45, so we're just about right on time. Again, we'll be posting the video on our YouTube and on our website at luminsmart.com/webinars. So if there's nothing else, we can close the meeting here in a minute. I appreciate it. All of our contact information is on the screen. Do not hesitate to share my email with your marketing team, your sales team. We're happy to get on the phone and do any sort of training while lots of folks are home and learning about new products and new ways to market Lumin. So please reach out directly. I knew if I stalled, I'd get another question from Stuart. Pardon if covered, and just to confirm, if there are any well, JP, you can read that. Why don't you go ahead and jump into that question and answer Stuart?
Okay, so the question is, if there are separated subpanels some distance apart, do you need only one lumen system to control circuits on each subpanel? And yeah, so you can do it either way, really. So the question is, if there are multiple subpanels, do you need multiple lumens? And our general rule of thumb is yes, likely so. It makes for an easier installation, better user experience if you have more circuits as well. However, if you want to extend our lumen wires to multiple panels, you are more than welcome to do so. So you could do, you know, a sub panel and a main distribution panel with a single lumen, but it just takes a little bit of extra work.
Okay, thank you. With that, Kevin, JP, anything else you'd like to add before we close out the meeting?
I don't think so, Val. Yeah, just thanks to everybody for the time, and feel free to follow up as appropriate. We thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks, everybody.